Decision trees.
Warren Buffett once said, "Someone's sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago." In the same way, the profits of tomorrow may come from a strategy chosen from a decision tree you create today.
A decision tree is a diagram that shows decisions to be made, uncertainties, potential outcomes, the probability of each outcome. We saw the first two bullets in the influence diagram. Adding the second two bullets allows us to calculate the expected value or EV of outcomes. Calculating the expected value helps us make the decision. Decision trees show the sequence of possibilities. Every path through the tree is a scenario for which we can calculate an EV. The tree shows a range of outcomes, their probabilities, and the value of those outcomes. This helps us assess and clearly communicate both the EV and risk. We can better help evaluate the odds and severity of losing money or some other negative outcome. This is a decision tree for the product strategy decision discussed in the influence diagram lesson. Let's first look at the shapes in the diagram. Squares represent decisions. Our product strategy decision of introducing a high price product or a low price product is the decision root of the tree. Circles are uncertainty nodes. Potential outcomes branch from those uncertainties. I show the probability of each outcome. For example, the probability equals 30% for success for a high priced product under each of those branches. The value of each outcome is a leaf on the tree. I've labeled each leaf with the NPV value of the outcome. You use whatever metric best measures what you value. Like influence diagrams, the diagram flows chronologically from left to right. This reflects the order in which events will occur or uncertainties will be resolved. There are rules for the branches. The book Making Hard Decisions states that each uncertainty node must have branches that correspond to a set of mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive outcomes. Mutually exclusive means that only one of the outcomes can happen. Collectively exhaustive means that no other possibilities exist. One of the specified outcomes has to occur. Putting these two specifications together means that when the uncertainty is resolved, one and only one of the outcomes occurs. For you math fans, this means that the sum of the probabilities from an uncertainty node must add up to 100%. I've simplified the outcomes to three options while there is a continuum of choices in reality. Thus, our choices can be thought of as representatives of ranges of that continuum. They can be thought of and analyzed as a discrete scenario or as a rough estimate EV of the range they represent. In my example tree, the uncertain outcomes are qualitatively labeled success, moderate success, and failure. A big part of the decision team's job is to clarify exactly what that means. In this case, it means mapping those subjective labels to discrete dollar amounts. We now have the information we need to calculate expected values. Doing this via a decision tree is called rolling back or folding back the tree. This is because the calculations are done from right to left on the tree, back toward our decision. We calculate values at each uncertainty node to find the EVs to the right of the node. And this ultimately leaves a set of EVs at the decision point from which we can select the one with the highest value. In complex trees, this is repeated for multiple sets of decisions and uncertainties. Our simple tree had three potential outcomes from the decision to roll a high price product out. They are summarized in this table. The outcome of success has a 30% probability and NPV of $100 million. Moderate success has a 50% probability and an NPV of $70 million, while failure has a 20% probability and an NPV of minus $30 million. To calculate the EV of the decision to roll out the high price product, we calculate the weighted average EV of the outcomes. That is calculated as 0.30 times 100 million plus zero point 0.5 times 70 million plus zero point 0.2 times minus 30 million, which equals 59 million. The same logic is used for the low price product. The EV calculation is 0.5 times 50 million plus zero point 0.3 times 30 million plus zero point 0.2 times minus 10 million, which equals 32 million. Our choice is now between a high price product with an EV of 59 million and a low price product with an EV of 32 million. This is the modified decision tree. We choose the product with the highest EV. The option with the lower EV is shown with two lines cutting across it. We've rolled back the tree from 6 uncertain outcomes to the one branch at the decision point with the highest expected value. We're pruning off poor uses of capital that lead to undesirable outcomes. I live in Washington state, which produces the most apples of any state in the United States. The state produces around 7 billion tons of apples, which comprises 60% of US apple production. You really should eat more apples. They're good for you and bring in billions of dollars to my state. Apple growers prune a tree to maximize the tree's energy available for producing the best fruit. Companies with limited time and resources must constantly make the same capital pruning decisions. There was a time not long ago when decision analysts wrote decision trees by hand and then barbarically rolled back that tree with slide rules or calculators. Modern technology saves us from such drudgery and the risk of errors. It was easy to manually roll back our simple tree, but complex trees can be much trickier. And let's face it, real life decisions are complex. There are Excel add ins and standalone decision software that help you build and roll back a decision tree. You could manually create a decision tree to show your supervisor that buying this software is a good investment. A free decision software named Excel Tree is available at www.probabilitymanagement.org/exceltree. This image shows the example tree from this course in Excel Tree. Influence diagrams and decision trees can be used together to frame and make decisions. Each has different strengths in the decision-making process. Influence diagrams are a good way to initially frame the decision and develop relevant information. A decision tree is a good way to analyze and choose amongst key items from the influence diagram. Decision trees better show the details of parts of the decision and how to evaluate them. However, the higher view of the influence diagram allows more to be considered. Decision trees quickly get overwhelming when too much information is considered for evaluation. The complexity of the tree rises geometrically with the number of uncertainties. This is why we only want to model the most important uncertainties in the tree. Unimportant uncertainties can be considered on the influence diagram, but don't need to be carried over to the tree. Also, a work team may talk through a complex influence diagram, but use a version with only the most important items for communication to decision makers or implementation groups. Influence diagrams are easier for people to understand. Decision trees are useful for explaining the choice in a decision once people understand the logic and calculation of a decision tree. Decision trees simplify a continuum of possibilities to a discrete set of outcomes. The outcomes from an uncertainty are often modeled as yes, no, or high, medium, low options. Monte Carlo simulation is a more comprehensive simulation analysis that utilizes a broader selection of possibilities and probabilities. Monte Carlo is a simulation analysis that randomly picks from a range of assumptions over many iterations to create a range of potential outcomes. Probabilities for ranges in that continuum of outcomes can be calculated. Decision trees assume a more deterministic, in other words, predictable pattern of events, while Monte Carlo is more useful for stochastic, in other words, random and uncertain analysis. Monte Carlo analysis can be very powerful, but it is more complex to create and communicate. All models are simplifications of reality. The totality of reality is incomprehensible to all of us. It overwhelms decision makers, even detail junkies like accountants and analysts. A decision tree is just a simplified proxy to represent the most relevant uncertainties in the forest of reality. Its simplification allows us to communicate, comprehend, consider, and calculate options. As Oliver Wendell Holmes said, "For the simplicity on this side of complexity, I wouldn't give you a fig. But for the simplicity on the other side of complexity, for that I would give you anything I have." The fear of simplification is that we're missing something important. Monte Carlo simulation or other sensitivity analysis can be done on the uncertainties in our influence diagram to identify the most important to our decision. This can help us simplify without missing important items. Please see my course on sensitivity analysis to learn more about this.